Well, welcome, John Whalley. Super excited to have you here, John.
I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for making the time. And let's just jump right in, I think.
All right.
John, artist, and I'd love to give your background in the way that you presented it, because it starts with you being born in Brooklyn, New York in 1954, and that you live now in Damariscotta Mills with your wife, Ellen.
That's right. Yep.
The most important thing. And then the next thing of importance are your two sons.
Yes.
Matthew and Ben. Matthew lives out of state, works in computer systems development, and Ben lives nearby in Cumberland, Maine. He is a Maine guide and self-employed captain.
That's right. Yeah.
Helping people.
I'm very proud of both of them. And Ben's doing very well with his first couple of years of being a captain.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's nice to
Great.
see him grow and develop his love. I mean, this was his love, and he's finally able to just give his full self to it. So
Great.
It's good. Yeah.
Also makes flies.
He ties
his own
beautiful
flies.
Beautiful
Yeah.
flies. That's the art.
That's his art.
The art heritage.
Yeah.
That's how it showed up in his life.
I'm sure. Have you done some drawings of his flies by chance yet?
I've done paintings that right now we're going to have stuff in an exhibit. I'm doing some paintings of the bait fish, which his flies are imitating. So we're going to have them together in this show. But
Great.
Yeah,
Great. And in 1981 to 85, you were an art instructor and an art therapy program development, the Northern Tier Children's Home in Pennsylvania, where you did a therapeutic program in the arts for 50 at-risk children. And then 87 to 2003, your volunteer work were with at-risk youth in Florida and Central South America. Those were street children, I believe,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
Yes, great works. And so today we're going to talk a few topics to discuss. One is your art career and life lessons as a self-employed artist, your experience and diagnosis and treatment of two aggressive lymphoma situations you had 10 years ago and what you learned from that experience. And then memories and observation from the children's home that you worked in. So that'll be fascinating. I would like to talk a little bit about your art. For those that don't know John Whalley's art, you are, I'm going to read a couple of things that I grabbed.
Okay.
This is a review. I believe this is from a gallery. I think it's Green Hut Gallery. John Whalley, advancing the tradition of American realists and acknowledging the Dutch masters. John Whalley's paintings go well beyond mere technique. His work exudes tremendous warmth, luminosity, and charm. He responds to what he calls the beauty that speaks softly. And then another one is, while many artists hide their lack of content behind a wall of impressive techniques, some of America's greatest artists, such as Richard Estes and Andrew Wyeth, have used great technique as a vessel for deeper content. Whalley belongs to this later group. Whalley made a name for himself as one of the most accomplished graphite artists in Maine. The most obvious quality of Whalley's painting is their stunning detail. His still lifes are so much clearer than photographs that they feel like hallucinations. The depth of your work is amazing, and the detail, it just speaks volumes to what's inside your mind, and the ability. I know you'll talk more about this, but on the layman's terms of all this, what I see is this matching of objects and their use, their lack of use today, but how you connect them to today's purpose, maybe, and just the beauty that you bring to them. So, maybe we could start there with your art career.
Sure. Yeah. When I was young, my mom went to Pratt Institute, and she had studied painting. And so when I was like 2 years old, one of my earliest memories is sitting for her while she painted my portrait. And every 2 minutes telling me, "Set up," I just remember she was very frustrated, but the painting came out nice. But I was not quite very cooperative. But then later
this is why
on,
you picked solid objects to paint instead of
mostly,
still
I
lifes.
guess. Forget those little kids, But so anyhow, some years later, the paints were always in the house. The smell of linseed oil was one of my favorite smells. And so she finally let me pick up the paints. And so at a very early age, like 7, 8 years old, I was doing these oil paintings. And I still have some of them, and loved it. And my father was more of an engineer architecture type. And so he was encouraging me to, architecture was, I think that's something he would have loved to have done. He was an engineer, but I think he loves the creativity of an architect and the medium and stuff. So anyhow, my third year of high school, I took a summer course at Pratt Institute where my mom had gone in architecture. And my father was not pleased, but he was so excited I was taking it. But then it turned out that that course taught me that really wasn't the road I could see myself going down. It was a medium that had so much responsibility to it. The idea of authoring something that involved, the physics of a building, and it was overwhelming to me. And I just thought it just doesn't fit. So, so I wound up deciding to go to the Rhode Island School of Design. And I got my BFA there, and so that's kind of how I wound up taking the art course. In high school, it just seemed to be a gift that, and I think I could speak to adolescents and young people, where at the early stage of life, one of the beautiful things to have some gifting of some kind is, it helps you find your place, and it also kind of helps you have something that stands by you, whether it's singing, whether it's public speaking. Everybody has a gift. I've heard this said before, and to find it earlier in your life is good because you can develop it and give yourself to it and have something that is kind of yours and makes. In a time of your life where everything seems so uncertain, it's nice to have something you can be developing and investing in. So that's what art did for me. Saved me from a lot of wandering around, because I didn't have an easy adolescence. So that was something that was there and I could be proud of, and develop. So anyhow.
In your early days, when you took that high school class, were you drawn to a specific type of art?
Yeah, I've from the very beginning, I can remember when I was young, I must have been like 7 maybe. And I saw a reproduction of Rembrandt's Aristotle contemplating the bust of Homer. Doesn't that sound like something that'd be interesting for a 7-year-old?
Yeah.
But all I remember is this luminous, warm light, and this guy standing there who was Aristotle, and he had this gold chain across the front of him. And I looked at it, and I knew it was paint, but it actually became a gold chain, and I was mesmerized. And that was one painting, and then other paintings began to have interest to me. And so, yeah, when I got to high school, realism, I was drawn to the Dutch masters and to like Caravaggio in Italy, but realism was what just grabbed me. And the magic of having something real, but it's made of paint and also a way to capture the light. And there was so many directions you could go with it. But yeah, so realism was the thing that grabbed me and kept me. So,
and when you took your classes in college or high school in art, how did and because you obviously studied other parts of maybe design or art, how did those influence you?
Well, in the 70s, I was in school in the 70s, which is almost half a century ago. Scary. But at that time, most of what was being presented was for me, it just seemed like there are no rules. It's like, just kind of find your voice. And the teachers, I had one course in painting where the teacher was telling me things the whole semester, and I didn't really catch what he was saying because it was very abstract. And then at the end of the semester, they had a faculty exhibit, and his piece was probably like 8 feet by 5 feet. And it was black with a little piece of red on him in the middle of it. And I thought, I've been listening to this man for like 4 months. And now I know why I didn't understand what he was saying, because he's obviously looking for something in his work that I just cannot relate to. So at that point, the school was there was a lot of that kind of thing. But there was enough in there where it helped to expand your idea of what art is and what, communicating is. And I tried a lot of the different things, but I always came back to realism. And I think looking back, it might have been wiser for me to apprentice with an artist, a really good artist who could pass on his skills like they did back in the way back when you would actually apprentice with somebody. That has its advantages, you know. It's narrow, but at RISD, when I was there, I spent evenings up in the library. They had this beautiful old library then. It was like you felt wise just walking in. It was like these circular stairways that took you up into the old books, and not many students are in there, but I used to love going up at night and getting in this little cubby hole. They had these little cubby holes, and I get my notebook out and I just copy all of what I could absorb from the old books. So
notes you'd be copying?
Yeah, I still have them.
Do you really? Yeah.
I still refer to them. Yeah. And it was just like the best of all these old books. And most of it had to do with traditional technique and how to use paint, the color palettes, all different things. So, so that's where I got a lot of my more traditional formal education. It was kind of on my own. So,
describe your technique.
I work in graphite, pencil. It's pencil graphite. I call it graphite because in the graphite drawings, you can apply the graphite with any number of things. You can get it in powder form as well as pencils, and you can rub it in with like an old dishcloth that's cleaned, or very fine steel wool, and get beautiful grays, and then you can draw into that. You can erase it. There's so many things you can do with it, and so I've tried to explore that. And that's the graphite. I love the quality of graphite. If you take a color, a value scale. Value means dark or light, and you have like the blackest black to the pure white. And you say you use like a rich, deep charcoal. That black would be as black gets, and then the white, you just have white. But if you take graphite, the darkest you can get with graphite is actually up in the gray range. So it's a narrower band of value, just like a violin would have like a narrow, as opposed to the whole orchestra, or it's like a piano where you get really darks and very deeps to highs. Well,
hence the black and white keys.
Yeah, exactly. So anyhow, that lighter range gives a quality that's very beautiful to me. I like the strong, like charcoal, dark, but I tend to like that more. I don't know. It has a feel to it, that silvery, grayish range, where the darks are still dark, but they're just not that dark. So that's that. The other one is oil painting, which is pretty much traditional. I paint on panels usually, though not canvas, because I like the feel of a hard surface and the smoothness of it. And that I could go on and on about, but it's a teacher I had at school taught me about, and this is what did help me in terms of it's not realistic per se, but he said, when you look at something you're painting, look for the spots of color, just the pieces of color, and try not to paint the thing, just paint those pieces of color. And when I did that, one day he had me do that. He said, I really want you to, because I had done this, there was a woman there posing and I was doing a portrait, and it looked like a traditional realistic portrait. He goes, no. He goes, that's great, John, but I want you to try an experiment. Look at this. Look at her, but don't look at her. Look at the little pieces of color. And the cool thing he said, and this is really kind of, you could apply this to a lot of areas in life. Am I talking too much?
No, please talk more. That's what we're here for.
I know. I get excited about it. But
that's awesome.
But he said, you know how you've heard of a Rorschach test, where someone like, no, that's a different test. You know those ones where they say like, I'm going to tell you a word, and before you think, give me
what's the response? First thing that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's like, it's not conscious. It's just, it comes out. You don't even know what you said, why you said that. Well, he said, I want you to look at that woman there. And when you're going to paint one portion of her, see if you can see a color before your mind begins to understand anything. And I did that, and I actually got what he said, and I saw like, well, there was this part of her like flesh that I saw purple. He goes, well, put the purple down. Don't put the flesh tone. And he goes, do that everywhere. Just look, and then before you even edit it, just put it down. And I thought, this is crazy. But I did that. And then at the end of the day, there was this beautiful portrait of this woman that was done in colors I never would have chosen. But when you got them all together, it was a zillion times better than like, flesh colored paint, And so what that helped me with was in my realism to let that happen. And so you try to, and the paintings that I love to look at museums, like Rembrandt's portraits of himself, when you get up, it's like he has greens and he has like violets, and it's not like what you think. Like it's like,
right.
Like some of these little paint kits you get, or crayon kits, they say, red, blue, this and that, and then it has flesh. It's like, this is the flesh crayon, okay.
So that's what the face is. And the hands are the flesh color.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it helped me, because a lot of realism you see is like that. It's kind of very two-dimensional. And but when you try to capture the colors that are really there, it's like an analogy Ellen and I were talking about this the other night, but in so many areas of life, there's things you learn by experience. And picture the Native Americans when they were like shooting bows and arrows at, say, a trout in a stream. And the thing about refraction.
Yeah.
And it took how many arrows before they realized, I'm shooting there and it misses every time. And they probably didn't understand why, but the actual fish is like a foot closer because the water refracts it. Mm-hmm. So if I want to get the fish, I have to aim for where it's not, and it winds up being perfect. And so in my painting, I do experiment with colors while I'm doing this realism, because a lot of times the color you really want, you can't see it exactly. But if you just push what you're mixing a little bit that way, it's like, wow, it's perfect. And I don't see it, but I do see it, So for me, it's every painting's an adventure that way, to kind of be open to what not to presume things. And when you don't presume anything, a lot of times your eyes get open to what's really there. And I think in life we're like that a lot of times.
Exactly.
I look back on my life and I operated on so many presumptions and assumptions that got me into so much trouble.
Stories we make up about things that we believe to be true.
Yeah.
Or we see something and we make up a story and then we believe it's true and it's so far from the reality.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's such a blessing and that's what I love about some great films and books. They take you through that journey of letting go of the presumptions and seeing things as they are. In fact, there's a book. I'm really rambling, but I was probably 15, and I had a dream one night, and in this dream, and I thought I had been having these weird dreams, and I thought, well, I'll put some paper next to my bed, because I never remember them in the morning, and I'll write down when it happens if I wake up. And this one night I did wake up, and I wrote down, and I woke up in the morning, and I thought, I don't remember what I dreamt, but I think I might have written it down, and sure enough, I did. And it was a book. It was Things as They Are, Paul Horgan. And I thought, that's weird. I don't know anything. I don't even know what that means. So I just, put it back there and said, okay, whatever. And dreams can be like that. But a few months later, I was helping a friend who was going to college ahead of me back to his school in upstate New York. And he was in getting stuff taken care of, and I went into this college bookstore. And I'm going down just looking at all these paperbacks. And there on the shelf was a book called Things as They Are, Paul Horgan. Don't ask me what that was all about. But all I know is I bought the book. And it was nice because then paperbacks were like 25 cents.
Yeah.
And I read it, and it was a story of this young boy and his loss of innocence as a child. And it was he took you through his childhood very autobiographically in such a sensitive way that as I've gotten older, that book means more and more and more to me. But the reason I brought that up was...
what's the name of the book again? We'll put
Things as They Are.
Things as They Are.
And the book takes you through that boy coming to see things as they really are. And I was, as a kid, I was always very much in my head and imagination. And a lot of times I saw and imagined things that probably never happened, but that book has helped me to see that happens in childhood. And part of growing up is seeing things as they really are.
Yeah.
And it's so hard.
There's also a talent in seeing things as they are and not losing your ability to be creative in what could be.
Yep.
Not getting stuck in what we see, because there can be a vision beyond what we see.
And I think there's I was teaching a class up at the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship here in Rockport. The men and women are designing furniture. They're creating these wonderful pieces. If anyone ever gets a chance to go up there, the Messler Gallery, they exhibit the students' work and the faculty's work. But, it's one thing to have an idea in your head, but it's another to be able to draw it down and see what you're thinking on paper. And that's why I was saying, well, actually drawing is seeing. And what we would do is set up, I brought my cello in, which I don't play very well, so it's not like I'm a cellist. Somebody almost gave it to me. So I set the cello up and I said, we're going to draw it. And
these are furniture makers that are going to draw.
And this one day I said, okay, I'm going to draw this cello. And so they're drawing it, and it's a very difficult instrument to draw because, as you know, it's got a million curves and
shapes.
And it's very deceptive. There's those books that have visual, what do they call them? Illusions. Visual illusions, you've seen them. Yeah. Well, anyhow, this cello is a visual illusion. When you look at it, you'd swear that it's going this way, but if you take a little stick and you hold it up, and it's like, wow, I thought it was going this way, and the stick is proving that it doesn't. It goes that way. And what it teaches the students there was, don't trust what you think you see. You have to have a reference, and there's tools you can use to actually see things as they really are. And then the drawings I did in the afternoon, after having made these crazy looking, and me too. I mean, if you just draw freehand, there's so many deceptive little things that throw you off. It's almost like that's doing it on purpose. Yeah. And but then when they started using reference points and a ruler to just, well, this is lined up with that, and the afternoon pieces came up much closer to what's really there. So in their designing furniture, the same thing, So
another metaphor for life.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes you do need
to see what's really there.
There's a word, Regra, which actually starts with an R. It's Portuguese, and it means a rule, like household rules, or a ruler. And to have this thing called a sighting stick, where it's simple, like a stick that you put shish kebabs on. But if you're drawing something, you hold a stick up and find the angles of one thing to another, and it helps. It's an outside reference that helps you be accurate. And so without rules, you might do a wonderful drawing of a very abstract, like a Picasso-like cello, if that's what you're interested in doing. But if you're really interested in drawing that cello and getting it down, then having the assistance of an outside reference point really helps. Another life lesson,
Yeah, another life lesson, exactly. So many things to talk about with this.
I know, it just goes on with this.
How do you create the colors? Like, you've given us a little glimpse of that. I know there's a lot more to it. The depth that you create. And before I forget, maybe it's a two-part question. Another thing that comes from the depth are the objects that you choose, and maybe you could talk a little bit about how those are found and then put together.
Okay. Well, I have a studio in Nobleboro that we had built in 2007, and before that, I was in an old dance hall up in Damariscotta Mills, built over the lake. It was really cool, but with all the swimmers out, so I got a little distracting, So we built
especially this one man that's swimming, and you don't know if he's going to come back or not.
You know that story.
I do, yeah.
Yeah. Another time.
John Thorpe, another story.
Yeah, that was funny. It's funny how that's one of the most wonderful things that happened from that living there was this swimmer that would go out every day. I felt responsible for him because he was about my age, and I know I couldn't swim as far as he was swimming to an island. So I kind of had to stop working at my artwork while he was swimming, which got annoying every morning. And then one day I had an open studio, and he comes walking in, and it's like, "You're the swimming man." So I met him, and he's become a good friend since then. Anyhow, that's that little aside. But the studio I have has we had it built with lots of shelves, and I have probably, I'm not exaggerating, if you count each one, like tens of thousands of little collections. They could be watches, old watches, faces, and or I have, I think, 115 brass nozzles that you use on a hose. But everyone's different. There's not two that are alike. It's pretty neat. And I mean, it's neat if you're into that kind of thing.
Sure.
Otherwise, it's kind of obsessive. But I've done portraits of them. Actually, there's a portrait of 3 of my nozzles in the airport in, I think it was the Delta Skywalk or something. So I've made it to Logan Airport.
Logan Airport,
yeah.
really? Yeah.
Every now and then I'll have someone say, I was taking a flight. And I say, but so somebody, they liked nozzles. Somebody at Delta liked nozzles. So, but I kind of have a whole variety of old objects that most of which were made back in time, like when the design had things in it that were there purely for the beauty, not because it was functional. Today, so much is just so functional, and it can be beautiful and functional. But back then, a lot of the objects just had a beauty to them. And
describe one of those objects.
Like I have these calipers. These old calipers you turn and it opens up, and the ones you buy now look like the ones you buy now. But back then the ironwork would be just beautiful, and it'd be engraved numbers. And we were up in Bath.
I mean, they were shaped then. They weren't just straight lines.
Oh yeah, they were done just for the beauty of them. And
the patina to the
well, that's the other thing.
Metal.
The ones we have, like the hammers, I have dozens and dozens of hammers, and I don't just go buy old hammers, but we look at, when we see a hammer that has like maybe 50, 60 years of people using it, paint on it, and the layers and layers build up. And this is where we could go off into the subject of stories. I mean, look at these things, and almost everything in that room, if you pick it up, you're immediately thinking of a story, because, like, who held it? And why was it mended with this tape around it? How did it get cracked? And why didn't they think they could just throw it out and buy another one? Well, back then, you didn't do that. And so everything is, a lot of the pieces I have, I think of them as veterans. They come back wounded from life, from use, layers of, but there's a lot of care in them too. So one of the reasons I like doing portraits of some of these old objects, and much of my work is still lifes with these objects in them. And sometimes it's a traditional still life, but sometimes you're looking down, and I might have an old, really cool, like worn out old door I found with a beautiful texture to it. And then when you put this hammer, say, on it, and the colors are harmonizing, and we create these little compositions. And I say we because Ellen helps. And that's what I paint, looking down on objects. And then you could add maybe an old photograph that begins to expand the story. But just the object itself is like a story that people can look at and finish the story. My grandfather used to have one of these. And then also I paint it with egg tempera. I didn't get into the third. I use egg tempera too. But I do this with oil. You build up layers of color in the same way that the actual, on the handle of that thing, it was built up. So I might paint the wood of the handle of that thing, and then add the layers of patina. And in the end, it has this, I mean, if I showed you the hammer, you'd look, I'd say, yep, dirty hammer. But when you have this painting that took all that care and time to examine how those layers are built up, but somehow in a painting, you just look at it and you go like, wow. It's like, like I never saw that way, and
almost more than a photograph.
I think so. I photographs can do that, but a good photographer. But I just feel like there's something where this is paint, but it all of a sudden became a hammer. And not only that, but I can see the layers, and I begin to think about things. And
I love the, sorry to
stories.
interrupt,
No,
the
just-
comment that I guess it was somebody, it was Daniel Caney from the Main Sunday Telegram when he talks about your work becoming a hallucination. And it really, you look at it and you say, that's real.
Well, that's what happened to me. I know, like down in the, I think it's in what museum? It's one that I've gone to quite a bit. Maybe it's in Boston, but it's a Vermeer. Anyhow, there's a Vermeer on the wall.
Which one of his works?
This one was, it was it was the same man. I can't remember this. He's in a few of the paintings, but it's like the Navigator, or he's with a woman or something. I can't remember exactly which one. But I know right where it is. And I went in there one day and I got hit. What's the word Daniel used?
Hallucination.
I got hallucinations going on because I was there and I just got lost in it. And I'm looking, how did I do? And why does this? And after about 40 minutes, the guard came over and he goes, I have to ask you to move on. I said, there's nobody around. He goes, I'm just a little worried about what you're planning to do. I'm just looking at this.
I'm casing the joint.
Yeah, and I find that it's a very gratifying experience. Like when I'm doing a painting, a lot of the things that happen in them are just like gifts. I find myself saying, I could never have thought of that. It happened, I'm pushing the paint around. All of a sudden, it's like, that's more than I intended, and those pieces really are special to me, where you're kind of, So anyhow, that's, I'm trying to think of where we were going with all this.
One thing was the pairing of the objects, and you mentioned the door and the hammer, let's say, and there's maybe sometimes it's texture, but are there any other reasons that might drive the combination of the items that you put together?
Yeah, like sometimes I'll have, like I remember a few years ago, quite a number of years ago actually, I found this photograph of these, look like orphans. They look like a picture of orphans that might be like in a camp at a war or something. It was kind of not depressing. It was just the faces of these kids really got me. And I didn't know, it just had that impression. It probably wasn't that, but it just had the impression these kids were all like in an orphanage. And I had worked in an orphanage, so it was kind of a subject that was dear to me. And so I found that. And then we were up in Searsport in Captain Tinkham's Emporium, which sells old stuff, which is no longer there, sadly. There's been a real dearth of, they're falling by the wayside, all these wonderful old antique places.
That you could drive up and down the coast and actually find something.
I know, now you really have to look or go to yard sales. Anyhow, so I found this book. It was right there on the rack, Orphan's Refuge. And the cover was broken. And but there it was. It was called Adelaide's Lament, but the main title was Orphan's Refuge. And I thought of that picture, and I said, "Oh wow!" So it was expensive, but I had to get it. So I got it, and it all banged up, but just the beautiful patina. And then I thought, well, what would some of those kids might have had in their pockets? So I think I had a whistle, an old whistle I have, and then some marbles, and I think I might have put a little pocket watch in there to reference time. And those objects kind of resonated with each other because you're thinking of those kids, and this is what was in their pockets, and there's a photograph of them. Here's a book, Orphan's Lament. Well, Orphan's Refuge. And I thought of the kids at the children's home in Pennsylvania, who that was really a refuge for them. And they didn't have maybe marbles and whistles, but they had, other things that were special to them, little things we made in the craft room or whatever. So for me, it was very personal, but somehow it resonated with others, And I think it's up at the Colby Museum of Art now. So it went into their collection and they put it there. But it's so nice to see sometimes when people are like, wow, it really means a lot to me. I said, well, that's great because it came out of someplace in my, somehow it just came together. So a lot of times it's just keeping your eyes open for what objects might resonate with another one.
How long does a typical painting take you to create?
Usually, like I would say, in the average, maybe around 100 hours or so. But I did a drawing this winter of, I call it Requiem, and it's outside our house every year. The guy comes by with that big toothed thing and cuts the grass down and tries to miss your mailbox. And this ryegrass just falls down, and it turns this beautiful cloudy green. Like it dries out, but it still has some of that green in it, and it just lays there, and all of the leaves are overlapped with the stems and the heads of the ryegrass. So I decided this winter, and Ellen said, "What were you thinking when I started it?" Because I did it. It must be like 4 feet by 3 feet, or even bigger, and it's like thousands. It's just looking down on this grass, and it seemed like a good idea when I started, but it was like I felt like I signed up for like the 100-yard dash, and they put me in like the marathon.
ultra marathon.
Yeah. What? Too late. You're off.
Yeah.
The gun went off. So I worked on it during the winter, and that was 400 hours. So I was very happy when it was over, but it was worth it, you know. But
now that you're saying that's a large scale for you, large size.
Well, actually, in 1996, somewhere around there. No, 86. Yeah, 86. I met a dealer in New York, but he's from Bethesda, Maryland. And it's a long story, which I won't go into, but I had been in a contract with another dealer that turned out to be not very fair. And there was kind of like no wiggle room to get out of it. So somebody advised me, like, what kind of pieces of artwork does he like? I said, well, he likes very small paintings. He says, well, do large drawings and keep doing them until he says, you know.
Done with you.
Yeah. So I did that. And after 6 months, he let me go. And here I am with these, like, they were 4 by 6 foot drawings. They each took a month. And I worked like around the clock. And so I took these 6 of them down to meet this man in Chappaqua, New York, one time when he was visiting somebody. And he took all 6 and went back to the gallery. And then next week he called me and said, get busy. I sold them all. So for 10 years, I did very large drawings. And with his help, it was very good. And then he was a great guy, but he eventually died and the gallery folded. And then I went back to doing my variety of like smaller works and bigger works, paintings, drawings. So.
And what's John Whalley's painting? What's your schedule? How do you?
Pretty much getting up in the morning, and it's a discipline, and that's something I was thinking about and preparing for our discussion was in terms of what maybe some young artist or just anybody who's working to become a better whatever pianist, carpenter, you name it, is putting in the hours and learning your skill, and there's no shortcuts. I recently wanted to learn I can play the piano by ear, but it's so limiting. And I thought, I'm going to get serious. I'm going to take lessons. And I took lessons for about 3 or 4 months, and I realized what I would have to give to this right now. I don't have the time, but if I really want to learn the piano, I need to take lessons. And it's the same with anything. If you want to get good at something, you just have to put the time in. And unfortunately, there's a good amount of time you have to put in before you begin to get much back from it. You know what I mean? It's like learning the piano is so frustrating. But once you learn enough where you can actually sit down and play this piece, then the motivation is the beauty of what you're able to do. But
and isn't that where many stop? You were talking about drawing before and the cello. And, if I was going to try to draw the cello, I couldn't get the angles right. And I might get frustrated and say, I can't draw. However, if I put the time in over time,
it's true.
The skills would come. Would I be a great artist? Maybe, maybe not. But you have to push through those barriers.
Like maybe architecture.
Yeah.
I just didn't.
Yeah. And some things are worth, I think the thing is we determine what we find worth in and whether it's of value to push through barriers or not. And sometimes it's a miss to not push through. Other times it's the right decision.
Well, I had a friend named Warren Frazina, who's now the Dean of Honors down at Hofstra University. But when we were in high school together, the reason we became friends from my side, I don't know why he thought I'd be a good friend to have, but we're still very good friends. But one thing I really admired in him is all, teenagers, high school, getting in trouble like I was. I was kind of just all over the place. But Warren spent a lot of the day that he had free time down in the basement of the library at school practicing classical guitar and like really practicing it, like playing these Bach pieces, intricate. And I couldn't believe his fingers could do that. And I thought, what kind of a high school student is this? He's actually like serious about something, No offense, high school students, but and I admired that in him. And he went on to. I remember him going to see Andre Segovia, which was his hero, I think, and he could play incredible. I still think of him whenever a Bach piece comes on, especially with the guitar, But anyhow, yeah, that's what it takes to give yourself to whatever it is, and give yourself time to work past all of the tedium. And I mean, when we're young, we learn the alphabet, and there's no reward in learning the alphabet and a lot of the math formulas. But when you get a job where you have to use them, then it's wonderful to know that stuff. It's like, you have to think about knowing it.
Right.
So,
right.
Anyhow, I think with me, I just spend every day working and learning. Every day I learn things.
Curiosity.
Yeah. And what color, so I learned the other day, I learned this thing where you mix a certain color that looks colorless almost, but you put it in this field of this other color and it becomes like this beautiful orange. You have to be there to understand what I'm talking about. But for me, it was pretty exciting. I thought, wow, and a lot of times the colors that you think would be the right ones aren't. So it's like that shooting the fish thing. You have to put the wrong color on, and it actually is the right color. And it's always fun to discover these associations that you actually remember and then can use on purpose. So,
yeah, fascinating. So let's kind of jump towards you had an experience with diagnosis and treatment of 2 aggressive lymphomas about 10 years ago. Tell us, if you would, a little bit about that.
Well, Ellen and I had taken a trip back to Brazil. I had lived there, and I was excited for the chance for her to see my world because we were getting to know each other. We got married in 2007, so being married a few years, I thought it'd be so good nice to take her back to a place that meant a lot to me. So we went down, and on the way down, I started feeling funny and getting like a rash. And then when I got down there, it got much more serious. And we were trying to figure out what was going on. And I was cutting grass down there. So maybe I'm allergic to that type of grass. And I had eaten this or maybe that. And it was a lot of things that could have been, because I started getting like hives almost. So I went to it was a small little town, and the doctor sits in his room like we're sitting in jeans and a t-shirt, and that's the medicine. So I went in, and he looked at me, and he went into the file cabinet, and this is like many years after I had lived there, and he pulled out an index card with my name on it because I had seen him way back then. So it was pretty funny for me to think that I have a medical record on an index card in
Brazil,
little tiny room in Brazil. But so anyhow, he looked, and he gave me a shot of something, and I didn't understand what it was, and it didn't help much. But Ellen and I came back after that week, and I went right into Maine Med in Portland. That's Maine Med, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And 5 doctors of different specialties looked me over, and they assumed it was something from Brazil. I mean, the coincidence of The only thing was I started feeling bad going down. So they were scratching their heads and came up with really no positive. The test didn't show anything. So, but I kept getting worse. And then they put me on prednisone, which cleared up the symptoms to some degree, but it didn't change anything in terms of it just covered. Prednisone can suppress the symptoms, but they're still kind of raging in you at times. So, but things got so worse, and I won't go into all the physical details, but I was like covered with, I was like red. And then my throat started pretty much disintegrating and all kinds of problems. And I was pretty miserable laying on the couch. And
how long is this now since you've come back? 18
months.
18 months.
Yeah, it took, and it was just, and every doctor that saw me was so good and was trying their hardest to figure it out, but it just didn't fit into anything and nothing seemed to help it. So we were, my sister called. I have a little sister. And she said, I had a dream about, she talked to Ellen. She goes, I had a dream about John last night. And she's a nurse. And she said, all I can tell you is I want you to take John, get on the next bus to Boston and go to Mass General. And my sister's a nurse and an attorney. So she said, and this is what you have to say to them, like write it down. Because if you say this to them, they're obliged to take you right in. And so we went and did that. Within an hour, we were on the bus, and I was in bad shape. And so they admitted me, and we spent the whole night there getting all the testing done, and then they sent us home. And we went back down with a meeting with a group of the doctors. And it took a few days, but and another nice thing was when the group of doctors was consulting a friend of ours she lives in Edgecombe on the river, on the Damariscotta River, and she called and said, you know what, I'm sitting here, it was a Saturday morning, right after I got back from Boston, and I'm miserable on the couch, and she said, I'm sitting here, and I got thinking about you because my neighbor is the head of like almost, I guess, everything in Mass General Boston. He's like one of the overseers or something. I'm not sure if, but she said he's the man. I think that's how she put it.
He's the man. Yeah.
And he's out on his lawn chair. It's a Saturday morning. And if you'd like, and I talked to him, I mentioned you. And he said for you to send him everything you can send on an email and he'll look it over. So he did. He spent a good portion of that Saturday. A man I didn't even know. And he basically, I think, got in touch with the people in Boston to encourage them to really consider this and that and the other thing. So anyhow, I wound up seeing this one doctor who said, John, and this is a great quote for all kinds of uses in life. He said, the reason why they couldn't help you until now is because if you don't know what you're looking for, you'd never know what you're looking at. It's interesting. He said,
say it again.
If you don't know what you're looking for, you wouldn't kind of recognize what you're looking at. He said, unfortunately, you have two types of cancer, two lymphomas, and one is called angioimmunoblastic T-cell lymphoma. And he said it's like 250 people in the States have that right now. So there's not many doctors, he said, who would have a clue what you have. But I see this, I'm one of the doctors that specializes in that. So I know what I'm looking for. So I knew immediately what you had. And I understood why no one else could. It's pretty interesting. Yeah. But what a providential to find him. So anyhow,
was he part of this group, John?
Yeah. But what was there was some funny moments in this, but you figure we're 18 months trying to figure out what I have. And finally,
you're uncomfortable. You're sick. You're not. This is not. You're living daily life. You're.
Yeah, I was really.
You're infirmed.
I was really bad. And if I showed you the pictures, you'd be like, "Wow!" But anyhow, he goes to us. So, okay, he goes. So what you have is this. Before he said the part I just said, he said, you have two types of cancer, lymphomas, and so in your lymph system, it's all through you, and it's called angioimmunoblood. And the other one is a B cell lymphoma that's being driven by the other cancer. And we're like, yes!
Now we know. Oh, boy.
I was really serious. It's like, finally, we know. And he said, I don't usually get that reaction. And I said, well, we just have been looking for so long, and what a pleasure. Not a pleasure, that's not the word I use. Just how good it is to know what it is. Because now we know we can at least try something. But one thing that happened throughout this entire thing, though, was Ellen and I both have faith in God, and we really have the sense that His will be done, and I'm at peace with that. That's all been settled. So when this whole thing came up, as painful as it was, and I had my days of just like crying out because I was very in a lot of pain during all.
And death looks good then.
Well, I just felt like we were. Yes, I have cancer, and yes, they can try to cure it, but if they can't, I'm at peace with the alternative, even though I'm not happy at all. I mean, I'm not I don't have my head in the clouds. I have children, and now I have grandchildren, which I wouldn't have seen had I died then. Right. So I knew it would be lost to leave, but I could accept it.
Yes,
and it would work out. So, and Ellen felt the same way. So, anyhow, after the diagnosis, I got referred to a stem cell. No, I guess the next part, let's just speed this little story up. The next part was I took like 3 or 4 months of 8 different types of chemotherapy. So every week we go to Boston on the train. We'd walk over to Mass General, sit down for the day with this beautiful nurse named Michelle, who came over and had 8 little bags, and you'd sit there all day while she inserted. They put a PICC line in where you had this little port, and she'd insert one chemo, and like she said, "Your cocktail's ready," because it's like a cocktail. And so anyhow, we took that 4 months, and then they tested me and found out that the cancer was still pretty active. So what the next step was to take my own stem cells out, which they basically put you in a machine where they take your blood out of here into the machine with a centrifuge, and they remove the
platelets,
stem cells, which are like white blood cells, I think. I don't know the science behind it. And then they put the rest of the blood back in, thankfully. And after about 8 hours, they get enough blood, enough of this kind of peachy colored stuff, which is your stem cells, they take it and they cleanse it as best they can with a process. But they said we can't get 100% of the cancer out of your blood, but we'll get most of it. And then you go into what they call a stem cell replacement, where they put you in a room completely isolated for, this was I think 10 days. And during the 10 days, they give you this chemo cocktail thing where it basically takes away your bone marrow. It disassembles your immune system. It removes your immune system because your lymph nodes are what are causing the problem, carrying the cancer. So they basically take away your stem cells that kind of are your immune system. And when you're in that very vulnerable state with no immune system, and your old one was taken away, they reintroduce, in this case, they reintroduce my cleansed stem cells, kind of like recharging my. And so after that whole process, they discovered that the cancer came back like it was before. So it didn't look too hopeful. And then they said, we have this brand new drug that's not even on the market that they're experimenting with, and it's not made for what you have, but it has promising results. So it's like a 50-50 chance it might do anything. So Ellen said, we'll take the 50 that it will. So I took that. Ellen gave it to me in shot form for, I can't remember how long, but once went through that regimen and they tested me, the cancer was beaten down pretty well. It was still there, but it was, and that qualified me to be able to have a second stem cell replacement. But this time they searched on this big international computer bank for a match. And they found somebody who was 25 years old, God bless him, who went to the hospital, and he went through the process of giving his blood. And he gave me a sack of his stem cells, and I went through the same process again back in the isolation room.
10 days.
Yeah. And the first time was very rough. The second time I brought my guitar and I had some music with me, so it was much better. And so, yeah, so they inserted, after the days of getting my bone marrow taken away again, and the day that they reintroduced this 24-year-olds into me, it was kind of funny because we had a number of people in there administering this. It was like all the pipes and things and whatnot. And Ellen was there, and it was like a party. It was like we were all joking and stuff. And I remember thinking, like, this is so nice. I mean, everyone's so warm, and I'm completely at peace about this whole thing. And it just was a wonderful feeling to know that, you know, you have faith that in God, and you have faith that if I ever was in that situation, I hope, you know, and I'm saying, I'm in this situation.
I'm here.
And we're just like joking. And there was a very funny medic there that he was fantastic. He was like the MC of the whole. So it was really kind of fun. And so anyhow, after that, they tested, and so they said, so far, so good. There's no cancer that we can detect.
Wow.
And so we go to the hospital every couple of days. We were stayed right in Boston. And so over the next 3 months, I was at home in an apartment in isolation. A friend of ours was there, an art student of mine has a little art studio, so I stayed there. And Ellen, God bless her, cleansed every item that came into the house, food, with handy wipes, and she wiped down our place every day. It was very critical.
You were highly susceptible to anything.
Yeah.
Your system was wiped.
Yep.
Had to rebuild itself.
It was COVID before COVID because I had to wear a mask and, you know. And so anyhow, we went to the hospital regularly for blood draws and tests, and we had this our stem cell doctor was wonderful. And so we just had such incredible people there. I can't tell you. Ellen made a saying for Mass General, small town hearts with big city smarts. So that's true. So anyhow, yeah, I came home, and that was 10 years ago. And
10 years ago.
Yep. And as of like 2 or 3 years ago, our stem cell doctor, who was my man, he said, kind of like, bye-bye, you're on your own, because, you know, you went from high risk, and as you've improved, you're down to basically, you're clean.
Wow.
So I count every morning. First of all, it's like, thank you, God, and thank you, whoever you are. I never got to know him personally because he wanted to remain anonymous, my donor. So, you know, I think to myself, I have different blood type now, and
your blood type changed.
My hair changed. It's gotten a little different, and I have his allergies, and I don't have the ones I used to have. So, and the ones I used to have,
you're a new creation.
Well, I love Italian food, and it always made me kind of have a rash on my head when I ate tomato sauce.
Oh, God.
I can eat all I want now. It's fantastic. But I'm allergic to lobster, which is kind of mean for
now you're allergic to lobster? Yeah.
That's mean, kind of mean for a meaner, but I'll take it.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that's my story about that. And there's other little side stories that are wonderful and personal, but Ellen and I really felt so carried through the whole thing. So one little story is,
please,
we were going in when I had the second stem cell replacement, and we were going in to see what the test would show. Did it work? Did it not? The last one didn't, and they didn't really know. So we're going in to get the results. So as usual, we called the cab and didn't come, and the usual company. So Ellen finally was getting late because we had to be there at a certain time, and she called another cab company, and this cab pulled up a few minutes later, and we got in, and there's music blaring, and he didn't appear to know English. So I think we thought he understood that we were going to Mass General. So he starts driving, and as we're going along, I'm listening to this music, and it's in another language, but I recognized the melody. And I said, Ellen, I think I know the melody to this. It's He Hides My Soul in the Cleft of the Rock. Mm-hmm. It's like a hymn, mm-hmm. but it was done like kind of reggae or something, but that was the melody. So I just leaned forward to him and I said, I know this melody. And he's like, yeah, because I don't think him. And
not much English.
No. Yeah. So we got to the hospital, which 10 minutes, and we pulled up in front where the guards come and let you out. Mm-hmm. Right before the guy came over, I turned to I was paying the taxi man. I said, I figured if he's playing a hymn, and he seemed to really be enjoying listening to it, I thought there's a chance that he might be be a man of faith, mm-hmm. or something. So I said to him, I'm going in to find out a very important thing about a test I had. And it's like, if you would mind, just say a prayer, meaning like for me when I leave.
Right.
And he goes, yes, because he said he didn't understand that. So he pushed the lock button on the door so the
guards couldn't come in.
And he said, I will pray in my language. And I said, great. So I thought he was just going to say, so he stopped and he raises his hands and he said this long, beautiful prayer. I don't know what he said, but when it got done, I was so lifted up. Mm. You had to be there, but it was pretty cool. Mm. And I never expected that. So we got out of the cab and thanked him, and the guard was frustrated, but we got out and we went in, and the test showed everything was fine.
Wow.
And then as the kicker, months later, when we finally were able to come back home, and our first Sunday going back to church, the first hymn that they played that we never played before was He Hides My Soul in the Depth of a Rock.
Wow.
In the Cleft of the Rock. So Ellen looked at me and she goes, I got chills.
Yeah.
But it was those little, Ellen said, these are called, in my book, she goes, these are called kisses from God. And we got a lot of them, and it carried us through. So, and I share that story, but, I know that a lot of people, myself included, there seems to be time when prayers aren't answered. I lost 2 little children when I was, my first 2 children I lost when I was a young father in my 20s. Our daughter Jenny was born 2 pounds, 1 pound, 13 ounces. Ooh. But she was perfect. I sat with her all week. She was, it looked positive in the neonatal unit, and she held my little finger, and I got to know her, in a way, and, she'd open her eyes. And I know that at that age, there's probably less they're aware of them when they get older, but she was just perfectly formed, and I fell in love with her. And then a son, Nathan, later, the second time. But so I know what it is to ask for something, and then so had I not made it through this lymphoma thing, that wouldn't have been the proof, Mm-hmm. But it is encouraging to hear a story. But it's also, my heart goes out to people who maybe they've had a story that didn't end so well.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
I just caught a clip the other day. I'm a fan of The Chosen, the TV show The Chosen.
Yeah.
And there's a clip where Jesus he's sending out the disciples to go and heal. Mm-hmm. They have now learned, and he is sending them out. And James, who was crippled in some way, I don't know exactly how, I don't know if anybody knows, but he was infirmed. Mm-hmm. And he would watch, the story develops that he's watching Jesus heal all these people. And James comes to him before he's being sent out and says, you're sending me out to heal others. And I'm honored to do that. I have to ask, why have I not been healed?
That's right. I remember that.
Why have I not been healed? You've healed all these other people around me. And Jesus looks at him and says, there have to be people who are not healed, who, when they reach heaven, will find their true healing. They'll find their peace, and their pain will be gone then. But there have to be people who suffer now to console those others who are also suffering, who won't find their healing until the end. I just thought that was really impactful because, you know, I'm sure from your experience, you've learned, excuse me, people suffer from pain. It's either physical, mental, or some type of spiritual pain. We don't see it, but it's often there. And how can we help those and encourage those people that are suffering?
Well, one thing that encouraged me back then when I was a man in my 20s, I was kind of a new believer back then. But I had read enough in the Bible to hear the story of Job, and how Job, in the beginning of the book, for no fault of his own, he loses his whole family in one day, except his wife. And she was not much help to him in what followed. But anyhow, he lost all his kids, all his children, and that resonated with me, having lost my kids. And I had a couple of years of bitterness, of just not losing my faith, just like, why, you know, and also guilt. Did I do something wrong? You know, all those things that you go through. But Job lost his, and then at the end of the whole story, it says God gave him back double of all he lost. And he gets like twice as many cows and twice as many this and twice as many that. And everything he had double. And then it says, and he had, I think, I don't know how many he lost, but he got the same number back. No. Yeah, he just got, like, if it was 7, he lost 7 kids. I guess, I don't know how many, but 7, say. God only gave him 7 back. It's like, well, why didn't he double them? And the answer is, because he didn't lose the first 7. They're home. It's like they're already home. And he didn't have to double them. But he did double them. He gave them. Right. And so I took that. Yeah, I just took that I'll see my daughter and my son someday. I don't know why it had to be this way, but I've since, with our 2 sons, thought to myself, life would have been such a different story if the first 2 children had lived. Maybe in that we wouldn't have had 2 more, and look who God did have for us. And so anyhow, you can't play games with things you really can't understand, except just to trust the one who you've trusted, and he knows what he's doing. And you know, and so anyhow, I just wanted to share that, because I always feel bad sometimes when you hear someone standing up and telling their wonderful story, and you think, who here, you know, who here might be a salt in the wound kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, so I've been on both sides, and so I don't share the story like, so everybody, you know, it's like, I'm just grateful, and I don't know why. I don't know why. Well, one of the reasons I think was I got to see my grandchildren. That's been, but you know, I'm just accept it and say thanks. You know, but,
and that thanks comes every morning.
Yeah.
Motivates you.
It really is like I shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
And I'm here.
And why am I here?
Well,
what can I do?
The big why. You know, that's to try to find why every day. You know? So
yeah. Well, we didn't get to the children's home, so maybe we could just touch on that for a few minutes, if you would.
Yeah,
tell us a little bit about the work.
When I was at art school, there was this class called The Fantasy World of Children by a teacher, Mahler Ryder, and he got the Providence Public Library to donate for a month or 2 this upper room, and our job was to go around in the beginning and go to factories, go around the city to all these places like paper companies, printers, and any stuff that was junk that they would let you have for free. You know, you ask them for it and bring it back. So we had like this room got filled with these huge cardboard tubes and all kinds of paper and just all kinds of junk. And then we had these kids that were from some place. I don't know where they came from, but they all had problems of some kind, emotional problems. And for the month, we would let them create their fantasy world out of that room. And it was like little tunnels and tubes, and it was really cool. And so I felt it was wonderful to see art doing this kind of therapeutic work with kids. And so over the years, I've always felt, until recently, I felt like I had to justify doing artwork with something that was, quote, more meaningful, like helping people, and especially kids. And I've come to see that art has value, and it's not something that you have to feel like it's less than anything. And I'm settled into just doing the artwork right now. However, then I always felt this thing, I wanted to blend the two. So thankfully, I was up in upstate New York doing my artwork, and I was connected with this program in Pennsylvania because I was asking about it. It was something they knew of I could do with kids, and it was a working farm in the beautiful endless mountains of North Pennsylvania, very poor, 50% unemployment. And it had 50 kids, and 25 boys, 25 girls, and it was on this working farm, and they went to public school there.
But they lived on the farm?
Yeah, they lived there. And so I started as a house parent, and then I pretty quickly started doing art therapy with the kids, and I set up a program there for that. And I was there for 5 years, and during the day when they were in school, I built a studio out of an old barn out in the field. So I was doing my work during the day, and then at nights and on weekends, I'd make stuff with the kids. And it was just great getting to know the kids, and it was a very warm family feeling to the place. It was an older Mennonite couple ran it, and it was just a healing place. And since then, I've been in touch with a few of the kids, and one of them came to live with us in his 20s when he was suicidal, and he called me late one night, and he said, "You remember me?" I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, I'm going to end it." And I said, if you can not do that and come to us. And so he came and he lived with us for a while, and then we got him set up.
Where were you then, John?
I was in Florida then.
In Florida, okay.
So he has hitchhiked down, and he had an extremely rough, I knew his story, and I had considered actually adopting him when I was at the home. So anyhow, sadly, about 10 years ago, he got killed in a car accident.
Oh.
So, but he had made a good life for himself, and after he left us, we got him set up, and he met a woman, and anyhow, so that it was a really meaningful time of my life, and it was just such a beautiful source of artwork. I mean, it was like living in a Wyeth painting, and so it was a very special time of my life, and I think of those kids a lot, and so. The funny thing was, real quick story, Ellen and I collect these old photographs that become artwork a lot of the time, and I bought this one, and at night I scan it in very high resolution, and then I blow it up, and I look at all the faces, and back then the cameras got such detail, and I get to this one face, and it's like, oh, how can that be? Because the picture was from 1909, and it was one of the kids at the home. It was him. It was like exactly him. The same exact face. And I thought, is he a time traveler or something? Who is this kid? And so I sent it to a friend of mine who worked at the home with me, who I had stayed in touch with. And they said, oh my God, I can't believe, And so within a week, she bumped into him in Pennsylvania. And now he's like 40 something, and showed him the picture. And so I got in touch with him.
Really?
And he just got married. But it was so weird. But it was pretty cool. So, so he knows he has a doppelganger, or he had one.
Yeah.
So, that was a very meaningful thing. And it was nice. It was good to see the kids respond and what artwork can do, and arts and crafts. So, that's kind of what I did there.
Awesome. Great. Well, we could talk for many more hours.
Yeah.
This has been great. I would say that when you talk about the good of your work, and I am a layman, but I look at your works and I see a dedication to detail and a stepping aside from the hustle and bustle of the world and looking at the most basic of objects and seeing their beauty and their creativity and what they can offer us when we take a time to pause and see all of the great creation that's around us.
And one thing with that, I called my collections orphaned objects.
Orphaned objects.
And they kind of echo, the theme is that with these kids, I mean, it was finding kids that were pretty rough on the outside and yet hearing their stories. And it's taught me that you really, with this time we're living in where it's a lot of divisions and people taking this side or that side, to stop and sit and open up and just listen to someone's story, because those people are not crazy on the other side of wherever you happen to sit. They're there because they have a story that brought them there. And if you don't understand that, you're missing everything. So I feel like with these objects I paint, it's kind of like a parable of that truth of just listening to the stories and slowing down, like you said, enough. So.
Yeah, I like that. So people can learn more about John Whalley through your website, John Whalley Studio.
JohnWhalley.com.
JohnWhalley.com.
Yeah.
Okay. And then there's also books that you published. There have been several, right?
Yeah, the galleries have done a couple. I have one. I'm working on a second one of newer work, but I have one. Yeah.
Yeah, they're beautiful. A great way for people to catch up with, and do go to the website and look and see the beauty that you create.
And also on Facebook, it's John Whalley Studio.
Oh, that's it. John Whalley Studio is your
separate
Facebook.
words.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Great.
Well,
thanks for all that you do, John.
Thank you.
You bring a great light to the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All righty.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.